second to talk about what broke my heart about living in California. And I have to say, one of the main things was the degree of codependent entanglement and fusion between dyads. So couples that were in some level of toxic relationality, and primarily, from the language of patriarchy and sexism, women who were completely diminished in their potential, like amazing light workers and star beings that had galactic level dreams about transitioning this reality into a higher form, that were completely, had like all their energy and years wasted in relationships. And I say wasted because they weren't going anywhere in terms of like their highest good. They were often siphoning all of the extra energy that they would have had for a project, and there were like inherent patterns. Fusion, let's introduce Bowens emotional nuclear systems theory. So in times of stress, if you're not self-differentiated, which I think is like a psychology term for like enlightened, you will portray certain mannerisms in times of stress, one being fusion, or what could be understood through entanglement. So it gets stressed out and you just get really tight together. Another is cut off, and I've noticed in men, in my experience in California, in these dyadic toxic relationships, quite a bit of apathy. So they just cut off, they're not emotionally available, they're not engaging towards growth or towards reconciliation, towards shifting the system dynamics. They just cut off. Another dynamic is over-functioning and under-functioning, and this is a complementary relationship. Okay, so as you overfunction, as you pick up all the slack and you notice that you're stressed out, there's some dynamic that means that things need to get done and they're not getting done at a pace that you feel is reasonable. You're doing extra. And this plays on the other person's context of underfunctioning, and then they're doing less than even they would usually do to contribute to a system. So these are really difficult dynamics that I've noticed play out again and again. And it's not always heteronormative romantic relationships. Oftentimes in community structures, it's like happening this way. There's too much compression of everyone in the system. There's a stress. There's not enough rejuvenative or regenerative practices, or there's a capitalistic fixation, and they're like disseminating into these classic roles over and over and over again, and without realizing that there's a reason they lack capacity. So this was just something that I noticed too many times to throw my lot in with it. I've had my own experiences with partners that were codependent or had narcissistic tendencies, were apathetic, that I felt like I would contribute to their ambitions, but I didn't always see it, the reciprocity. And I made a really conscious choice to cut those relationships. I'm friends with every ex-partner that I have, so I didn't cut those relationships in a way that created conflict, but I was clear that it was done. It wasn't serving my highest, and whether or not we shared children, I wasn't going to continue it. And as a result, very interestingly, I was constantly being asked for relationship advice. Constantly. And really dynamic, beautiful, amazing women would often come to me, and I'd be like, I don't know what you're asking me. I would totally take on celibacy for a few years and disengaged from some of this stuff, and I'm like, I wonder why they think I'm the way to go. And I realized that ultimately they weren't really interested in how I could fix their relationship, because I always gave the same advice. Khalil Gibran's "Let there be spaces in your togetherness, and make not a bond of love, but a moving ocean between your shores." And that without spaciousness, there can often be conflict. So it's like a major go-to. So yeah, you're constrained to each other, like make some space. But I think it had more to do with the version of person that I was. Like I was constantly this magnetic entity for what could be, how they could be. And I absolutely see this happening in relationship. I don't see this happening in toxic relationship. I'm just as sucked into the drama as the next person when I'm in a relationship with somebody who doesn't want to grow, who doesn't respect boundaries, who's constantly triggering me. And so I think it was interesting. I was often getting what's the relationship advice? And, you know, 9 times out of 10, then the women would leave the men. And I'm like, I never made the suggestion. I just said make some space. But I think that ultimately they weren't really asking me about how to make the relationship work. I think they were asking me about how to find themselves.